My name is Alex, and I've always been drawn to the unknown. There's something about stepping into the wilderness, away from civilization, that's both freeing and terrifying. Last summer, I decided to test my limits. Just me, a backpack, and the vast, uncharted forest ahead. The forest was notorious for its eerie silence and the strange stories locals told. Some said people went missing there. Others claimed to hear whispers in the wind. But I brushed it off. I thought it was just folklore meant to scare outsiders like me. When I took my first step into the dense forest, the towering trees seemed to close in around me. The air was heavy, and every crunch of leaves under my boots felt amplified. At that moment, I didn't realize the forest wasn't just alive, it was watching me. As I ventured deeper into the forest, the world I knew seemed to fade away. The trees were impossibly tall, their branches intertwining like an endless maze above me. The air was unnaturally still. No birds chirped, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive silence that seemed to grow heavier with each step. A few hours in, I began to notice strange things. At first, it was subtle. A faint echo of footsteps that didn't belong to me. A shadow darting between the trees, just out of sight. I told myself it was my imagination. But then I stumbled across something chilling. A small, crude symbol carved into the bark of a tree. It was like nothing I'd seen before. An unrecognizable pattern that sent a shiver down my spine. As I traced it with my fingers, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The unease was beginning to settle in. I glanced around, hoping to spot some sign of wildlife, something normal. But there was nothing. It felt as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to make the next move. As the day turned to dusk, the forest seemed to come alive in the worst possible way. The oppressive silence was broken by faint sounds, rustling leaves, whispers in the wind, and what sounded like distant footsteps. At first, I thought it might be animals, but the sounds were too deliberate, too human. When night fell, I set up my tent near a clearing and built a small fire. Its flickering light felt like the only thing keeping the darkness at bay. But then, I heard it. The unmistakable crunch of leaves just outside my tent. I froze, my heart pounding. I grabbed the flashlight and slowly unzipped the tent. I shone the light around, but there was nothing there. Just the trees, standing eerily still. But as I turned back to the tent, I noticed something strange. Footprints, fresh footprints, leading from the clearing to where I was standing. Panic started to take hold. I called out into the night, asking if anyone was there, but only silence answered me. That's when I saw it. A shadow, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. It didn't move like a person. It almost seemed to flicker, like it wasn't fully there. I stumbled back into the tent, locking myself inside as if that flimsy fabric could protect me. 1 minute. But the worst part wasn't what I saw. It was what I heard. A low, guttural whisper that seemed to come from all around me. You shouldn't be here. I don't know how long I stayed frozen in that tent, clutching the flashlight like it was a weapon. The whispering had stopped, but the silence was worse. It was suffocating. Suddenly, the tent shook violently, as if something or someone was clawing at it. I screamed and bolted out, leaving everything behind. The fire had gone out, and the forest was pitch black. The beam of my flashlight barely cut through the darkness, but I kept running, my breath ragged and my legs trembling. As I ran, I realized I wasn't alone. The shadow, the one I'd seen earlier, was following me. It darted between the trees, faster than anything human. And then it started to take shape. Its form was grotesque, shifting as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. I tripped over a root and hit the ground hard. My flashlight slipped from my hand and rolled away, its beam flickering as it landed. In its faint light, I saw it. An emaciated figure with hollow eyes and twisted limbs crawling toward me. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. I scrambled to my feet and ran, my mind racing with one thought. I had to get out of this forest. My body was screaming in exhaustion, but the sound of those distorted whispers behind me pushed me forward. Finally, I saw the edge of the forest, a faint break in the trees where the moonlight spilled in. With every ounce of strength left in me, I sprinted toward it, not daring to look back. As I broke through the tree line, the whispers stopped. The air felt lighter, the oppressive weight of the forest lifting as I collapsed onto the ground outside. I don't remember how long I lay there, gasping for air, staring up at the night sky. The open field felt like a sanctuary, but my mind was reeling. What had I just experienced? I looked back at the forest, its dark silhouette standing ominously against the moonlight. It was silent again, but not in the same way as before. It felt satisfied, as if it had let me go. The next morning I returned with a group of locals, hoping to retrieve my tent and belongings. But when we reached the clearing where I had camped, there was nothing there. No tent, no footprints, just an eerie stillness. Before leaving, I noticed something carved into the bark of a tree near where I had slept. It was the same symbol I'd seen before, but this time it was larger and deeper. Beneath it, scratched into the wood, were 3 words: "Never come back." I haven't been back to the forest since that night. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake up to the sound of whispers, and for a moment, I feel like it's still watching me.
I've always been a nature enthusiast. Growing up, I loved hiking through dense forests and sleeping under the stars. There was something magical about the wilderness. It was quiet, untouched, and raw. So when I got the chance to camp solo in the heart of Blackwood Forest, I couldn't resist. People warned me about it though. Stories about strange disappearances, unexplainable sounds, and a haunting presence that followed you deep into the woods. But I thought it was just folklore. I mean, I had camped so many times before. What could possibly go wrong? The day I set out, the sky was clear, and the air carried the earthy aroma of pine. It was perfect. My gear was packed, my map was ready, and I felt invincible. As I ventured deeper into the forest, the towering trees seemed to swallow the sunlight, casting long shadows on the ground. It was peaceful, but also unsettling. After a few hours of hiking, I found the perfect spot to set up my camp. It was a small clearing surrounded by trees that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky. As I pitched my tent, I noticed something odd. There were no animal sounds, no birds chirping, no rustling leaves, just silence. But I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just my imagination. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I started to feel it, the uneasy stillness of the forest. Something wasn't right. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story and want to hear more spine-chilling tales, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what happens next. The sun had long disappeared beneath the horizon, replaced by a deep, unsettling darkness. The air grew colder, and the forest seemed to stretch infinitely, its towering trees blocking out even the smallest hint of light. I sat by the fire I'd made, attempting to push away the growing unease that had started to creep into my mind. But something felt off. There wasn't a single sound, no rustling leaves, no distant animal cries, nothing. The forest was unnervingly quiet. I looked around, expecting to see some movement, maybe a shadow flitting between the trees, but it was just still, too still. I shivered, trying to shake the feeling. But then I heard it, a faint whispering, barely audible. It was as if someone or something was speaking just out of reach, behind the trees, where I couldn't see. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaking. No answer, just silence. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was probably just the wind playing tricks on me. But as I turned back to the fire, I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching me from the shadows. And then I saw it. A pair of eyes, glowing faintly in the dark, just at the edge of the clearing. They stared at me, unmoving, unblinking. I swallowed hard, feeling a cold sweat trickle down my back. I had no choice but to keep watching, waiting. What was it? A creature? A lost soul? Or something far worse? My eyes locked onto those glowing orbs, and my heart raced. For what felt like an eternity, we stood there, me frozen in place, the eyes unmoving. Then, with a sudden, terrifying motion, the figure stepped forward, slowly emerging from the shadows. It wasn't human, at least not entirely. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs elongated, and its body cloaked in a dark mist-like substance that seemed to ripple with an unnatural energy. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but I could feel its gaze penetrating deep into my soul. Every step it took towards me sent a shiver down my spine, like something dark was creeping closer. I bolted. My feet moved faster than I thought possible, pounding against the forest floor as I darted deeper into the woods. The sound of my own breathing was drowned out by the crunching leaves and snapping twigs beneath me. But I could still feel it, its presence, drawing closer. Branches clawed at my skin, the cold air cutting into my lungs. But I couldn't stop. I didn't dare look back. I could hear the soft, almost imperceptible footsteps behind me, steady, relentless. It was following. Suddenly, I stumbled over a root and hit the ground hard. I scrambled to my feet, but before I could even turn around, I felt the thing closing in, closer than before, its presence pressing down on me, suffocating me. I could almost hear it whispering again, "You can't escape." Desperation clawed at me as I searched for anything that could save me, a weapon, a way out. But all I could find was darkness, endless trees surrounding me. I was trapped. And then, just when I thought all hope was lost, I remembered. The old stories, the ones people had warned me about, how the forest didn't want outsiders here, how it had claimed others before me. And if this thing was part of the forest, I had to fight back. Somehow. But how could you fight something you can't see? A cold dread settled over me as I realized maybe I was already too late. The thing drew closer, its shadow eclipsing the dim light of the moon above. I could feel its cold breath on my neck, and the suffocating weight of fear gripped me tighter. Every instinct inside me screamed to run, but this time I knew I couldn't. I had to face whatever this thing was, or die trying. Desperately, I reached into my backpack, pulling out the small knife I had brought with me for protection. Its blade felt cold and useless in my trembling hand. I held it up, though I knew deep down it wouldn't be enough. The creature didn't seem to care about anything. Its only purpose seemed to be drawing closer, closer, until I could almost hear the faint whispering again, like it was calling me, beckoning me towards the unknown. But then something strange happened. The air around me shifted. Darkness rippled like water, and from the shadows I saw them. Other figures appearing one by one, similar to the creature, though smaller, less menacing. They hovered near the trees, their eyes glowing faintly like the first I had seen. They watched me, their forms shifting in and out of view. Were they spirits? Lost souls? Or something far worse? I couldn't tell. All I knew was that I was trapped between these dark entities, none of them seeming to be fully alive, yet not completely dead. I gritted my teeth and tightened my grip on the knife. "Stay back," I hissed, my voice shaking as fear threatened to overwhelm me. But they didn't respond. They only moved closer, surrounding me slowly, like I had entered a web from which there was no escape. I could feel the creature behind me now, breathing down my neck, its presence overwhelming, suffocating. I turned to face it, knife raised, heart pounding. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice cracking with desperation. But instead of retreating, it simply tilted its head, as if studying me, as if it were toying with me. Then it lunged, fast, silent, and eerily fluid. I swung the knife wildly, feeling the blade cut through the air, but it passed right through the creature. It wasn't solid. It was something else entirely. I staggered backward, my breath catching in my throat. What was this thing? What did it want from me? And most terrifying of all, how could I possibly escape something that didn't seem bound by any laws of nature? I knew then, this wasn't just a nightmare. This was something far beyond my comprehension. And if I didn't find a way to fight back, I was going to lose myself, forever. The creature continued to close in, its form shifting in and out of the shadows. Its eyes burned with an unnatural glow, and the whispers, faint but growing louder, filled my ears. It wasn't just following me, it was calling me. And as much as I tried to resist, I could feel a strange pull deep within me, as though something was awakening. I stumbled backward, gripping the knife tightly, but I knew deep down it wasn't going to be enough. This wasn't just a physical threat. It felt like something darker, something that transcended the boundaries of reality. Suddenly, I felt it, the cold breath against my skin again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the creature. It was something else, a presence I couldn't see, something intangible yet undeniably there. The air itself seemed to hum with a malicious energy, and the forest around me seemed to hold its breath, watching in silence. "Who? Or what are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. But there was no answer, only the growing darkness, pressing in from all sides. It felt like the forest itself was alive, watching, waiting. Suddenly a voice, soft, almost distant, whispered into my mind. It was calm, yet filled with an eerie sense of control. "You don't belong here. You never did." I spun around, my eyes darting through the trees, but there was nothing. No one I could see. It was as if the forest itself was speaking to me, warning me. And then I felt it, the undeniable feeling of being watched by something far older than I could ever comprehend. I just wanted to be alone," I murmured, my breath hitching. But the voice answered again, clearer this time. "Alone. No one truly comes here alone. You've disturbed something ancient, something that doesn't forget." Panic surged through me, and I gripped the knife tighter, glancing around for any sign of escape. but the shadows seemed to shift, moving in ways that defied logic. They weren't simply shadows, they were alive, and they were closing in. "What do you want from me?" I cried out, my voice trembling with fear. Again, no answer, just silence, except for the faint whisper that echoed in my mind. "Your presence here awakens what's been sleeping, and now there's no going back." I realized then, the forest wasn't just silent, it was listening, and it wasn't going to let me leave.